Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So the spoilers embargo is up in Nier Reincarnation. Let's talk about the Emerald chapter from the People World act of the main story. Of all the People World chapters so far, I think I like this one the most, and it gives me the most to consider. Very interesting, both in terms of the characters featured and the nature of the cage. But I think it brings up more questions than answers. Let's talk about the characters first, and the pairing of Yuri and 063Y in the beginning makes sense because there is more talk about the nature of the cage and the characters themselves, and they are some of the best characters to do so. They are from technologically advanced times, so they can understand concepts like virtual reality, data, holograms, etc. If Fio were here, she would be like, AI? What's that? Also interestingly, Yuri is the ruler, and 063Y is one of the ruled. It doesn't really come too much into play here, but it's interesting that the combo is there. And what we get here is kind of the first confirmation that the cage is indeed a virtual space. There's always been the possibility that the cage was about, for lack of better terms, magic or ghosts or heaven. But here we get confirmation that the cage is virtual. Getting back to the characters, based on what I was looking for, which I laid out in my preview video, link below, I got nothing, so at first I was disappointed. Maybe my expectations are too high or in the wrong place? I still point to Sadio and Priyat as my favorite part of People World because their story and relationship is continued on beyond their Scarecrow story, and we get a bit of resolution. I was hoping for something similar with 063Y and F66X, like 063Y learns the truth about his wife and the decisions she has made, and he has to decide to forgive her or not. With Marie and Yuri, I was hoping they would forgive themselves and each other for failing to lead their country. But with 063Y and F66X, their main story is the point of reference, not anything from their past or EX stories or secret stories. And with Yuri and Marie, they never really talk to each other, much less forgive each other. So my first impression was, oh, they're spinning wheels again, like the Indigo chapter or Akeha in Scarlet. But actually, with the embargo, I could marinate on the characters for a few days, and although it wasn't what I was looking for, Marie and Yuri at least turned out to be interesting, even if it still leaves me with things to look forward to between them. First of all, Yuri struck me as acting very strange and out of character until it was revealed that she was corrupted or perhaps controlled by the invaders of the cage, and then I was like, oh okay, that explains that. Like in her main story, she is obsessed with the concept of perfection, but only in regards to herself. She is highly aware of what she considers her imperfection, and seeks to complete herself so that she can better run the country she is put in charge of. But in Emerald here, she suddenly cares about the imperfection in others, the prisoners like 063Y, or the soldiers in Griff's era, and that struck me as weird. Also, she starts talking about a kind of rivalry with Marie, which never came up in her main story or character story. And then finally, she wants to download all the memories of the cage, which is so different compared to getting the single thing she was denied at her creation in the main story. This Yuri was like a cartoon villain version of her. I felt early on something was up, and sure enough, there was. So, we don't actually see the quote-unquote real Yuri in this chapter, and I look forward to seeing more of her, if there is more. Marie is also interesting because it appears she has the ability to move freely within the cage, unlike any other character, even Mama, and she has the ability to make changes, as we saw with her adjusting the choices available to 063Y. But, like with Yuri, I'm wondering who she really is, or maybe the better question is when she really is, because both Yuri and Marie, at the conclusion of their main story, are not in any state to do anything. We do briefly see post-main story Marie, however, with her shattered memory, as Yuri describes her. Both Yuri and Marie might be software versions of earlier in the story, like their part 1s. I am anxious to see the continuation of their story kind of more than any other because they don't seem to be following the rules of the other characters, and they could potentially have a lot of power, and affect the greater story in big ways. And Griff and Lars seemingly have some kind of capability to also move around or appear in the cage, and that makes no sense. But in that last scene, I liked when Marie kind of sympathized or excused Marie, saying she overexerted herself, she was too serious, and I was like, oh, is this the beginning of some kind of sisterly love? And then there is the artwork of Devila and Popola in the game. I didn't notice this at first, but that is Yuri and Marie reflected below them. And I was like, oh, what does this mean? I hope it's not foreshadowing. But Devila and Popola kind of acted as guides and support in Automata, and I wonder if from now Marie and Yuri might act in a similar role, moving forward and helping the other characters who are actually human ones navigate the cage. And although it has been referred to before, a big theme of this chapter is the idea of perfection. What does perfection mean to different entities? And is a conscious the biggest barrier to perfection? And does a lack of a conscious make for the best ruler or god? So there's definitely room for further development and further resolution for the different characters that have appeared so far in People World. Although in the case of Sadhu and Priyat, there is a book in the library that says once a form is changed, it cannot be changed back, and I was like, no! If that's true, then there goes my hope of Priyat returning to human form. And then in another book, F66X's, it ends with a note, which I have heard is a reference to a chord, closing off that story. Perhaps the choices offered to 063Y towards the end are related to that. And perhaps since no other books we read had that at the end, they can change and branch out in new directions, pointing to more developments in the future. Here, let's talk about the new insights we got into the cage and the overarching story. We got a lot of references to other Yoko Taro works. There was a reference to a chord I just mentioned, Devila and Popola appeared, and we saw the friggin' library with Gishin and Anki from Sino Alice. I first stepped into the library and I was like, this doesn't look like the library from Automata. And then I went a bit further and the music started and I was like, wait, this sounds familiar. And then I saw the floating bookcases and I was like, no way, no way. And then the marionettes appeared and I was like, man, they did it. They actually did it. That paid off my beginning Sino Alice in a way I never could have hoped for, and it reminded me why I went back to Nier Reincarnation after dropping the JP version the first time, because it did so much that was unlike other mobile games. And with all the baffling and infuriating decisions by the developers this year, I lost sight of that a bit, but this reminded me how special the game and the Yoko verse is, and it was on a level with the Reincarnation boss appearing in the Automata anime from earlier this year. Also, in the Emerald chapter, we got some breaking of the fourth wall. Sino Alice does it all the time, but Nier Reincarnation not as much, but we did get this glitch in the opening shot of the chapter, and then we got actual physical skip tickets in the hands of characters that previously we used as players. These are big winks to us, the audience, and as developers drawing our attention to the fact that we are playing a game and watching a made-up story. And that runs the risk of trivializing what we are looking at, destroying our immersion. But here I think it works fine, and then of course there's the precedent in other Yoko Taro games. Maybe the most famous example of breaking the fourth wall in the Nier series is when we are in the credits of Automata shooting up the staff, and that turned out to be extremely affecting, precisely because the fourth wall was broken, and we, the player, became the focus. And I think I brought up the concept of more story beyond People World. I feel like there's so much unexplored potential in People World that there kind of has to be more, or else the game is going to feel unfinished and incomplete. I'm looking at the pace of storytelling here in People World, and we don't have progression or resolution for most of the characters that appear. And also, there's no Hina and Yuzuki. There is not really enough time before 3rd anniversary to do justice to everything that needs to have justice done to it. But the financials of the game worry me very much. Perhaps, I've talked about this theory before, perhaps it is linked to the anime, which is going to get another season. I've also said elsewhere that perhaps Reincarnation is a launching pad for the next console game. And if the story were continued and concluded there, I would be okay with that. Alright, sorry if that was rambling, but that was what I thought at the end of Emerald. I'm very excited for the next parts. Chapter 4, Topaz, should come out in November, and Chapter 5, if there is one, could come out in February with 3rd anniversary. And a bit of bonus info for folks that made it to the end of the video. If you go back into the map and replay the fights, you can get some large antlers. That's very welcome for people that did not pull for Divine 063Y. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.